So it is once again time for a market update. These numbers are going to show some really interesting things. Let's get started. One of the things that we always do is a market update. We take all the statistics in the MLS system from Knox County for single family residences, and we try to interpret that back to you so you have a better idea and understanding of what's going on in the market. And today's numbers are very interesting, so make sure and stick around until the end. So the first thing I like to do is I want to start out with average days on market. Now, you hear me say this in every video. Never the best thing to do is use averages, especially when it comes to something like real estate. But it is a standard in the industry, and you hear it across, television, you read about it, you hear about it on YouTube, what is the average days on market. So I use that here, but I'm going to follow that up with something called median days on market. Median days on market simply mean that 50% of the homes sold before this time, 50% of the homes sold after this many days on market, and it's a much better indicator of days on market for sellable listings. And so I'm going to give you both of those numbers. And to begin with, let's start with average. And in October, the average days on market for all of Knox County was 47.8 days. That is a decrease, actually, from the month of September. In September, that number was 54.7, which was a pretty significant increase because August it was 41, jumped all the way up to 54.7 in September, something odd going on. And then in October, back down to 47.8 as an average. Now, as I said, that is an average, easy to affect because we do have a lot of listings that I call shadow inventory. They're sitting on the market, they're overpriced for condition or location. Something is a mismatch, and because of that, they just sit and run up the number of days. So median days on market in the month of October, that was 18 days. That's a much better representation of what's going on. So if a listing is hitting the market here in Knox County and it's priced appropriately for the market and for its condition, for its location, then you're seeing about 2 weeks or better on the market, 2 to 2.5 weeks. And that's about what we're seeing here locally, being in the market every day. So I think that's a very good indicator for sellable listings. We did see that number decrease from September. It was 22 in August, 22 in September, and then they dropped to 18 in October. What does that mean? There's a lot of numbers here in October that I find very interesting and honestly a little bit hard to explain. So I think when we see November's numbers, we'll see, is that dip at the beginning of a trend, or is that just some kind of oddity that happened in 1 month? And it's the reason I talk about you have to look at trends year over year, month over month, and come up with some trends to get an understanding where the market's headed. If we look at days on market year over year, last October it was 33.9 days. So we see over almost a 2-week difference in average from last year to this year. As I said, much of that is simply the sellers trying to get their expectations properly aligned with today's market. If we look at median days on market, it was 14 and now it's 18. So you don't see much of an increase. It's a slight. Like I said, I think that gives us a much better indicator of what's going on. So next, I want to look at sold to original list price. Sold to original list price, simply that. When they listed the home, what percent of that original listing price did it actually finally sell for? Today, that number is 96.1%, and this is very, very dependent on location, condition, and some other things. But we're seeing about a 4% discount or negotiating room from original list to actual sold price. How does that relate to last month? Well, last month it was 95.8, so basically about flat. If we look at year over year, last October it was 96.5, this October 96.1. So we're seeing anywhere from 3.5% to 4%. We've seen that fluctuation now for well over a year, and that's pretty standard for our market if you take Knox County as a whole. No real big information there that we need to glean. I'm going to skip absorption rate because I want to come back to that. I'll explain what that is, and we'll hold that to the end, as well as I'm going to hold the median sales price to the end. It's going to shock some of you. It did me today. Looking at it again, I'm still having trouble explaining it, so we want to talk about that. How many homes are actively listed for sale at the month of October? Well, that number was 1,863 homes. In the month of September, it was 1,862 homes. So basically the market stayed flat. We saw about as many new homes come on the market, go off the market, sales or cancellations or expireds. So, we're not seeing a tremendous amount of homes hit the market, but at the same time, the market's holding its own. And if we compare that to last year, we do have about 500 more homes this year than we did last year at this time. Last year at the end of October, we had 1,369 homes available for sale in Knox County. Like I said, this year it's 1,863. So we're looking at somewhere around 500 more homes throughout the county total. That's a small number, but for those of us who are in this market and need the inventory, for you, the buyers, it is a positive. Hopefully, and I say hopefully, we're going to see that grow. I'm going to do a little bit of a summary here at the end, and I really encourage you, if you're seriously considering buying or selling a home in East Tennessee, Knox County specifically, to stick around and listen to that summary. Let's look at sold listings. I pull these numbers at the very first of the month, and I say that because one thing I see is there's some of these numbers that about 2 weeks in, as people input data from the end of the month, everything gets into the MLS, they change. Some not very significantly, but solds are something that do change, and I'm seeing those change when I go back and update the numbers later on in the month or at the beginning of the next month. So we had 491 homes that sold during the month of October in Knox County. That's a very low number. Last year, in October, we had 612. So year over year, you can see the decrease. If we look at September to October, we had 579 homes that sold in September, 491 in October. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. When you watch this market update at the end of November, and I have updated that number, it's probably going to be somewhere a little bit closer to 550 instead of 491. It happens a lot, especially with the weekend, the way it fell with the first of the month. So I feel like that number is going to grow, and it's really going to be more of a flat number in homes sold. Still a decrease from last year, and we have seen a slowdown in home sales year over year as far as transactions go. It hasn't really affected pricing yet, but we are seeing a slowdown in transactions this year compared to last. And I can't wait to do the year end and see what the numbers are year over year, as much as I like numbers. Two things we want to talk about: absorption rate, median sold price. Let's start with absorption rate. Absorption rate is, we don't get anything else listed for sale today. How many months is it probably going to take to sell out of everything we have at the current rate of sale? Well, that has been a number that Knox County has struggled with. I have had offices in other markets, and in those markets, we've been seeing anywhere from 4 to 5.5%, a 5.5 month absorption rate. In Knox County, we finally are getting above 3 or at 3. In October, it was 3.02 months. I updated September. It was in the high 2s when I did the report. Now it's at 3.01 when you add in the sales and the rest of the data. So for the last 2 months, we basically are at a 3 absorption rate. What does that mean for you, the buyer or the seller? It means we're slowly working toward a more balanced market. If we could see that number hit 3.5, closer to 4 month absorption rate, as a buyer, and me being a buyer's agent mainly, we start having more options, and it's just a better, very balanced market. I like 3.5 to 4 months. It means that as a seller, you actually have to price your home properly, but it's at the same time, it's not a buyer's market, so you're not giving the home away. You're not having to make huge concessions. It's just a very nice, balanced market, and we are slowly getting there. Now, I don't use averages at all for sales price. They're they fluctuate way too much. No more sales than we have here in Knox County, and we have some very varying markets just within the county. Some zip codes that, we have median sale price over 750, and then some that are in the 2s. So you have to be very careful with averages. So here's where I saw the big surprise. Last month in September, the median sold price was 405. The month before that in August, it was 390. In October of this year that we just finished, the median sales price was 381. To put that in perspective, compared to last October it was 399,950. That represents a 4.75% decrease in median sold price from last October, comparing last October to this October. I honestly haven't been able yet to figure out why. That is usually a number that as the month goes along and everybody gets everything in the system, as I talked about earlier, that doesn't change a lot. That could be affected by what those sales that are input are, but the reality of it is, because we use a median and not an average, it's usually not affected. I can't figure out yet what that means. I think it just simply means that the mix of sales were from certain zip codes that were a little less, and it brought that median down. But I can't wait to see November and see, is this the beginning of a trend for any type of price correction here in Knox County, or is that simply just a blip that you just basically need to cut out of the year's data when it's all said and done and throw away because it didn't fall within the trend? It was just something odd that happened in the month. We all know that the country's in an odd spot right now. In the market, I've been doing this for a very long time. In the market, I've had a lot of people reaching out to me saying, what do you think about the market? I find it odd, to be honest with you. I find Knox County to be, and very specific particular parts of Knoxville, to be very resilient and to honestly kind of be unaffected. Think about this West Knoxville market right now where homes are priced properly. They sell within that 2-week period or so. But we are seeing that median sales prices is kind of odd, and we are seeing some weird numbers come up. I see us working toward a really good 2026. A 2026 where if you want to sell a home, you're going to get a very fair price for your home. At the same time, we are working toward where buyers have the opportunity to choose between 3 or 4 homes and not having to choose the home that they can find that they can make work. So I'm really looking forward to 2026. The factor that can mess that up is rates. We all want rates to go down if you're a buyer. But if we see a significant drop in mortgage rates, I still don't believe we're going to see much below 5 3/4. But if we do, we are going to see an increase in buyers back into the market as it improves affordability, which in the Knoxville market is going to do nothing but worsening inventory issue. Instead of getting better, it's probably going to start getting worse again. And it's also going to create probably some price increase that we don't really need here in this county because of where we are on pricing, 2 to 5%, 1 to 3% year over year, pretty standard. That's what I anticipate if we stay above that 5 3/4 mark for next year in interest rates. But if we get down to 5.5, we could easily see 5 to 10% appreciation rates again in certain parts of Knox County. As a buyer, it helps affordability. If rates drop, at the same time, it hurts affordability because it pushes up pricing, and we already have a demand issue or a supply issue, and because of that, an increase in demand would just exacerbate that. So what am I telling you? I'm telling you that the market is holding strong here in Knoxville. It's a solid market. It's working toward a balanced market. It's a great time to buy between now and the end of February. If you're a buyer, you can't get a better time to buy. And honestly, in my opinion, if you're a seller, it's a good time to sell because you have so much less competition than you're going to have in the spring. I hope you find these market updates helpful. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Reach out to us, send me a text, an email, give us a phone call, or go ahead and schedule that Zoom if you haven't. If you're even remotely considering moving to this Knoxville area, we would love to talk to you. It is never too early to start the conversation. It doesn't cost anything to do so. It just lets us get to know you, you get to know us, and for us to help you increase your IQ of the real estate market here in Knoxville. Well, until next time, guys, I can't wait to see you right here in Knoxville soon.